So it's the end of yet another week, and here on this channel, that means one thing and one thing only. Every weekend, I post an episode of this series we do called Your Take Not Mine, where I turn to you, the viewers, to give me your hottest NBA takes of the week based on what's going on at the time, and I then choose my favorite submissions and discuss them in a video. This week, a lot has been happening, with Summer League basketball getting underway, where we've been able to see some of the best rookies and younger guys compete, along with more trade rumors coming out, so of course we have plenty to discuss. In order to submit your takes, I make a community post on either the day of or the day before the video, similar to the one that you see on your screen now, so if you want a chance to be featured in a future episode, be sure to stay on the lookout for that. Before we start though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Wichitu, and he says that the Nets are not actually going to trade Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving this summer, and that they'll convince them to run it back for one more season. When the news broke that Kevin Durant officially requested a trade away from the organization, I'd be lying if I wasn't included in the masses that assumed that the franchise was imploding. If Kevin Durant were to leave, then it is assumed that Kyrie would follow him out the door shortly after. The issue with all of this, though, is that the Nets are rightfully expecting a gargantuan haul in return for Kevin Durant's services, because we've never really seen a superstar player to this degree signed to a long-term contract look to get traded like this, as most superstar trades that we have seen have come much later in their contracts when they only have 1 or 2 years left compared to Durant having 4 years left. The Nets want a treasure chest of draft picks along with at least one all-star caliber player plus some filler all included in any trade offer for him, which again is completely reasonable given the circumstances, but the issue is that no team right now really is willing to give up that much. From what I've seen in various reports, the Nets thought this trade request would bring in a bidding war for Durant, but that just has not been the case. Of course, plenty of teams are reaching out and throwing offers their way, they just don't come close to the price tag that the Nets have set for him. So while most people assume that the Nets will eventually cave and accept a lesser trade offer eventually, I'm not so sure that they will, and seeing this take made me relieved to know that I wasn't the only one who felt this way. Low-key, the Nets have made some solid moves this offseason, trading for Royce O'Neal and signing TJ Warren, on top of the fact that the team will get Ben Simmons back on the court next year. The Nets have, without question, improved the roster, so why not at least try to give it one more chance with the core that they have? Ultimately, Kevin Durant could pull a Ben Simmons and refuse to play until he gets traded, but I'm really not convinced that he would do that, so if the Nets hold firm on their price tag for him, then I don't think it's crazy at all to think that Durant will be back playing for the Nets to start this upcoming season. The next take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Timothy, and he says that Keegan Murray will be the Scotty Barnes of this year's draft, proving everyone wrong about him after being scrutinized at the time of being picked. Right away here, I will acknowledge that I am one of the people who has been relatively harsh on the Kings' decision to take him 4th overall, I can admit it. What I want to clarify though is that I never said Murray would be a bad player by any means. I simply disagreed with the decision to take him ahead of someone like Jaden Ivey, because from my point of view, when you have a top 5 pick, you should be drafting the player with the highest star potential as opposed to a safe player with a high floor. Murray was always a player with a very high floor, and nobody is surprised at all that he's playing well in the Summer League, nor will I be surprised when he's one of the most productive rookies this season, because he was one of the most productive players in college last year, but he's also going to be 22 years old when the season starts, and most of the other draft picks in that range are still 19 years old, so that was always going to be the case. Additionally, how a player performs as a rookie doesn't end all of the discussions about whether a draft pick was the right decision, because they have their entire careers ahead of them. Will Murray be able to seamlessly transition into an NBA role as a perimeter shooter, occasional post threat and slasher? Yeah, he definitely will. Is he closer to a finished product than the other top top picks around him? Also, yes, he probably is. He'll be a first-team all-rookie guy this year for sure, and he may even be in the Rookie of the Year conversation, but we're a long way from this debate being over. The next take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Jaden, and he says that Jabari Smith will struggle to become a star because of his struggles as an overall shot creator for himself. The biggest appeal with Smith as a prospect going into this year's draft was that he was far and away the most well-balanced player on both ends of the floor. His defensive versatility is unmatched amongst this year's draft class as someone with the size and length of a power forward that can also handle opposing centers with the lateral agility to switch out onto perimeter players and use that length to pester them. Offensively, he was also one of the most efficient perimeter shooters in college basketball, and when he gets to his spots, there's not much you can do to stop him from knocking down the shot because he comfortably shoots over contests. But admittedly, the original take at hand here is relatively valid, because while he's pretty good at a lot of things, the one thing he's not great at is creating separation off the dribble to generate his own offense. He doesn't quite have the handle or the burst to blow by defenders or shake loose of them, so a lot of the shots that he does take tend to be contested tightly in these situations. And while I have no doubt that he'll be an incredibly impactful player at the next level, I do agree that he might not make the leap into star status because of this. When you think of a star player for a team, he's usually a guy who you can trust to have the ball in his hands and go make a play for himself. Jabari Smith is a lot of things, but he is not that, unfortunately, and that could be the difference between him becoming a really good player and him becoming a great player. And finally, the last take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Podest, and he says that the Minnesota Timberwolves are now officially title contenders after their trade for Rudy Gobert. He gave a long explanation for why he feels how he feels, and it concluded with the idea that the Timberwolves have better perimeter defenders than the Jazz did, which will make them a more complete team. And if I'm being honest, I'm not so sure I agree with that point. In order to acquire Gobert, the Timberwolves had to ship out two of their best defenders, in Patrick Beverley and Jared Vanderbilt, and the Wolves are, as a whole, not necessarily stellar in that regard outside of Gobert. D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Edwards both aren't particularly good defenders at this point. Karl Anthony Towns defending power forwards full-time alongside Gobert is something that I've been skeptical about, and their bench pieces don't necessarily include any lockdown guys either. Gobert was able to plug a lot of the holes in Utah defensively, which will be huge for the Timberwolves, but I don't agree that the Wolves are necessarily better out on the perimeter in this regard. What I do believe is that the Wolves have a lot more firepower offensively than Gobert's Jazz teams did, and that's why they should be a much improved team for next season, but whether or not they emerge into contender status is still to be determined. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about the takes discussed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.